Okay, this is going to be a tutorial for Levitation 2, our second take at the Levitation assignment. This is a shot I took yesterday, and I'm going to show you the process of turning it into, this is the end result of a shot I took yesterday. I'm going to show you the two shots that we used for the composite, and then the process of creating this. Alright, so that's where we're going. Let's take a look at where we're starting from. So these are the two. Let me open these up so you can view them. That's one, there's the other, okay? And so I've been, a couple things that you're going to notice. I've been careful to kind of do my best to cover over the parts of the chair with my foot. You can see this foot here. This is in front of the chair, and I've also got my laces hanging down, which helps add to the effect. So when you see it here, right, you can see the laces are hanging down. And then I've also made sure to try and make it so that I can kind of clean up that chair pretty easily. I also chose a background that I thought would be clean and neat and easy to work with. I'm not on a busy background where there are other people. I'm not next to the lockers, which are kind of ugly. I've chosen a background that you might see in a photo studio, okay? So think about that sort of stuff. For your assignment, you're going to be doing this off school property anyways, but it's still something to think about. You can still take good photos at school, if you're careful and you scout properly and you look for interesting lighting and interesting backgrounds. We just don't want you shooting at school because many of you don't look for interesting backgrounds and you are shooting in hallways which are ugly and poor lighting. So some things to think about. Alright, so let's take a look at how this is done. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new file. I'll close this. And I'm going to say File. For those of you who know Photoshop, some of this might be a little bit repetitive, but there's certainly some tips in here that are going to help you with this specific setup. One thing I usually do before I start Photoshop is I reset my essentials. So here on the right side there's a drop down, and I usually go essentials as the workspace setup, and I reset it. Because what happens is if I'm using these tools and I start undocking and moving these palettes around, if you're looking for something, say you're looking for the swatches and I've got it down here, and you're looking over here somewhere, you're not going to be able to find it. So I'm going to reset my essentials workout. That way if you're looking for something that I'm using, you can find it, okay? That's also available here under Window, Workspace, Essentials, Reset Essentials. Okay, so do that. Once you've done that, we're going to open up a file and say File. There's a file menu that's getting cut off in the screen recording, but it says File at the top there, and I'm going to say File, Scripts, and I'm going to say Load Files into Stack. What that means is it's going to select the two photos that I took. Say Files, and Browse. It's going to select the two photos that I took, the ones that you saw, this one which is the empty photo and the one with me on the chair. So I need both of these. So if I click on the first one, I hold Shift on my keyboard and select the second one, and then hit Open. Okay, it's going to give me both of those images, and then I say OK. And what it's going to do is going to drop those files into one folder, or into one file. So you'll see here on the right side, I've got two files. Okay, now I used a tripod, so you can see that my file, if I zoom in here using my magnifying glass on like this little circle here, and I turn off my layers, you can see that I'm pretty close to exactly in the right spot because I've got a tripod that I used. There's a little bit of a shift, but not much. I'm going to show you in case your version of this is off by a little bit. When you do that same process, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, and I select my two files. Now you should be using a tripod for this anyways, but this little checkbox here, attempt to automatically align source images. Photoshop is going to look at the two images and try and make them exactly in the same. So it's going to look at those two, the pixel values, and try and align them so that they're exactly in the right spot. So if I now zoom in on that circle and turn off my layers, you can see it's now exactly in the right spot. There's a slight lighting change. That's not going to affect us, but they're identical, right? And that's important. Okay, now this is a pretty big image. If I go to my hand tool, you'll see it's actually quite a large image. So I need to zoom out. A couple ways to do that. I can use my magnifying glass, okay, and I can go to the minus up here in the sub menu, and I can subtract. I can also just go Command 0, and that'll fit it into my screen. Okay, Command plus will zoom you in, Command minus will zoom you out, and Command 0 will fit it to your screen. Okay, All right, let's take a look at our two photos. So there's our two photos overlaid. They're aligned properly, and we should be in pretty good shape. We're going to be using a tool called masking. Okay, now the way this works, the way I always explain it to my contact class is, if you imagine that you had these two photos printed out in paper, this one and this one printed on paper, I could use the two of them to kind of, if I kind of cut and paste and like cut out some shapes, I could use one to obscure the other. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use this version, and I'm going to cut some pieces out, basically where this chair is over here, right? I'm going to cut that out and seamlessly put it on top of that spot where the chair is. So you'll be able to see me peeking through, and then that other one that's got the background is going to be right here, and it's going to kind of obscure that part that's missing. Okay, now to do that, depending on which one you've got on top, right now I've got my blank canvas on top and the picture of me at the back. It doesn't make a big difference which way you do it. You're just going to be doing one thing or the other. Imagine having those two pieces of paper printed out, and you wanted to cut it out so that part would show. You would either be cutting out the picture of the chair and hiding it, or cutting out the picture of the person and hiding that. So depending on the order, and I'll show it to you both ways so you can see it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a mask. So to do that, I'm going to, up here in my, again, you can't see it, but there's a menu item here called layer, and I'm going to go layer mask, and I'm going to say reveal all. Okay, and what's going to happen is it's going to give me this white box next to this layer, this graphic here. Now white shows everything. When you saw it said reveal, okay, this mask is revealing everything on that layer, reveal all. Okay, and what that means is it's showing me everything on the layer, but I can hide all of the things on that layer too. Remember that underneath this, okay, if I move this, you'll see underneath this is that second picture, right? This is a stacking order, so there's one image on top and one image underneath it. And so what I can do is, if I hide it, instead of doing that, I'm going to delete this mask. If I said layer mask, hide all, it's going to be a black mask. And what's happening now is it's hiding everything on this layer, and it's showing what's underneath it because this is all hidden. Okay? So it's still there, right? It's just hidden by this mask. All right. So what I can do now is, because I'm showing, I want this picture of me to come through, but I want this part to be hidden. I don't want to see the chair. What I want to see is the part of this layer that's going to be in front of it. So if I start drawing, now notice here I'm going to draw on my picture. I don't want to do that. I want to draw on the mask. And I'm going to draw in white. So here I've got black and white. And if you don't have these colors, make sure, see that when I'm here, I can actually change these to different colors, right? That can be a color here. But if I'm on my mask, my only options are grayscale, so black, white, or different versions of gray. So I want this to be black. If that's not black, click here on this little small icon and flip them so that they're black or white, depending on what you need them to be. Okay? All right, I'm going to draw in white. So I'm going to go to my brush tool. Now, you may have one of these tools selected. Okay, just to get that, there's a little triangle here. Okay, and if you just click on that, you'll see that there are some hidden tools underneath that. I'm going to go to my brush, and I'm going to look at my submenu. These are the submenu items for my brush. Now, there's an opacity and there's a flow. Excuse me. There's a flow, which means like how smoothly the brush works. There's a size slider here. Okay, there's also a hardness, which means, is it like a hard-edged brush or is it a soft-edged brush, right? Am I using like a fine tip marker, or am I using like a paintbrush that like spreads out a bit? Right now, by default, it's 75. I'm going to bump it up to about, I'm just going to type in 200 here, just to show you what happens. So remember, I'm going to be drawing in white on my black mask. And what's going to happen is when I do that, actually, let me undo that. I'm going to set my opacity to 100. Okay. And now when I do that, what you can see is, you see it over here on the right side, I have this white line going through my mask. Well, what's happening is I'm obscuring or hiding part of this image, and what I'm seeing is that this one in front of it is being shown, right? That's just in front of this. So when I turn this on, you can see that this is, oops, this is just that image that was here, right? It's just in front of, go back a step here in my history. Okay. It's just in front of what was there. And the reason I have these aligned perfectly is because I can now, using this brush tool, I can now hide as much of me as I want to, right? Now you can see that there's some edges. You can see the edges. We'll fix that in a second. But that's not what I want to do. I don't want to hide me. I want to hide the chair, right? So I'm going to be doing something more like this. All right, let's resolve this. I'm going to go layer mask, and delete this layer mask, and I'm going to add it again. Layer mask. I'm going to go hide all. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I should be doing, which is hiding parts of this chair. Now you can see we've got a little bit of a problem here, and that's that the lighting is a little different between here and there, right? That doesn't look very realistic, and even if I went in really close, right, even though these things are exactly the same, the lighting changes because I'm obscuring, like, this shadow that's here is no good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I mentioned that the brush has got a hard edge, and you'll see all along the edge here, this is like a hard edge brush. If I change this in my brush settings, and I change this from 100 to 0, watch what happens. See how that softens up the brush? Right? The edges are no longer those hard edges. So what I can do now, I'm going to zoom out, Command minus to zoom out, and I'm going to bring my brush size up to, say, maybe I'll go to 400. Okay? And I'm going to do this. Now, the reason that this works better is because if there is a lighting change between image 1 and image 2, I'm kind of blending them because it's got that soft edge brush, right? So see how that's now blending in a little bit more nicely. I'm going to have some issues when I get into, like, here. I'm going to have to use a smaller brush and be a bit more careful, but you'll see how that's done, okay? So we're getting there. So let me continue with this, and let's just take a look at what's happening. Look at the shape here, okay? What's happening is I've got this, which is this shape here. Okay, remember that this is the whole, there's the image. It's still there, right? I'm just hiding it now and showing it. And it's just in front of, excuse me, it's just in front of this picture of me. So I'm just showing this background cut out in front of the picture of the chair, all right? Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to zoom in, Command plus. There's also, with this brush, if I use the square bracket tool, while I have my brush selected here, if I click the square bracket key, I should say, on my keyboard, okay, it's going to make my brush smaller or bigger, depending on which of the square brackets I use. There's also this hand tool, and there's a shortcut for that. A hand tool just moves you around when you're zoomed in, but if I'm using the brush and I hold spacebar, it just changes me over to the hand tool, so I can, like, work on what I'm doing and then readjust when I need to. Okay, so you can see here's where I'm going to have a problem. I'm going to make my brush a bit smaller. Okay, so as I get in here, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful as I get in here to be kind of cautious with the way that I do this. So I'm going to go to my brush tool. I'm going to change this to a hard edge brush, and maybe I'm not going to go quite 100. I might back it down just a little bit, just to have a little bit of kind of like a little tiny blur. And I'm going to just go in, Command plus. Next time I do this tutorial, I should probably put some hand lotion on. What are you going to do? All right, and I'm going to bring this down again to quite small, and I'm going to just go along here, and I'm going to keep that part of my pants there. Oops. So if I say I went too far, see that? I kind of cut in on my hand like that, right? I can bring that back by just drawing in black, right? Because remember, all it's doing is it's not changing the image, it's just changing the mask. So I can bring back anything that I wreck. I can just bring it back by drawing in black or white. Okay, so I'm going to follow along here. Okay, obscuring this part of my finger, and I went a little too far there, so I'm going to switch back to black again. Okay, alright, and I'm going to just neaten that up to make it look a bit more realistic. Okay, I'm going to clean this up, and I'm going to eventually come back to this to smooth it out with a brush. Just got softer edges, but that's it. I should be good here because that chair is no longer in the way there, right? That I've kind of gotten rid of the edge of the chair. The rest I'm going to do with a softer edge brush. Come back in here. I'm going to switch to black. Bring back my hand. I should probably get a manicure next time I do this job. Another little tip. If I use a small brush like this and I click here once and then hold shift and click here, it'll draw a line between the 2 points. That's a good way to get kind of rounded edges. Alright, so you get the point. I'm gonna just kind of hammer ahead here, and then you'll see this sort of in faster motion because it's kind of boring to watch me do this. And the last tip I'll give you is X on your keyboard will shift your color. So if I'm drawing and I want to change, say I did this and I was, oops, too far, I can just hit X and change my colors and then bring it back and then switch back over just by hitting X. That way I don't have to leave my workspace. And then those keyboard shortcuts are pretty useful in making things go a little faster, and that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is add a bit of a shadow. So what you'll notice is that there's a bit of a shadow being cast behind me here from the chair and from my body, and then without my chair, my body there, the background, this original background like this, has no shadow, right? Because I'm not there to cast a shadow. So I'm gonna fake that out. So I'm gonna create a new layer. I did that without explaining it. So right here, next to the garbage can in your layer palette, there's like a little new icon. I'm gonna click that. Create a new layer, okay, and that's going to be the shadow layer. I'm going to go to this selection tool. Now remember, there's a couple of them here. So there's a square, a square, a circle, a line. I want this circular one, and I'm going to just draw kind of on the floor here, like a selection, right, like that. And on this layer here, I'm going to go edit to the edit menu. Actually, first I'm going to set this back to black, and I'm going to go edit, fill. With black, make sure that it says black here, not content aware or any other such thing. Black at 100%, and hit OK. And it's going to put this weird big black dot here. I'm going to deselect that, and then I'm going to add a blur by going filter, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to crank that blur all the way up like this. Okay, maybe that's a bit too far. You have to play with this just to get it right, but that helps add a little bit of kind of the realism. I'm going to make this a little smaller by transforming it. I'm going to go edit, free transform. I'm going to bring it down like here. I can actually move this around, but I kind of want it maybe about there. Okay, and then I double click it to make it go away. I can bring that back. Okay, see this transform thing? I can either double click there or click this little checkbox here, and it'll apply that transformation. And then finally what I might do is on this background here, okay, and not in the mask, but on the graphic, okay, I'm going to go to this tool, which is the burn tool. There's a few of them here, dodge, burn, and sponge. I want the burn tool, and with a big fat brush, I'm going to go like, maybe not that big, maybe 1200, and you'll have to kind of guess. Bring my exposure down to like 10 because I don't want to overburn this. And I'm just going to add, just by like clicking the background, you can see it's just adding a little bit, and you can see it showing up here, right? It's adding a little bit of like darkness. What happens is it actually just darkens the exposure to that area, and that'll make it look a bit more like there's a shadow there. Okay, and that's it. When you're done, you may want to do a couple things like, excuse me, maybe I want to add, you know, if you know Photoshop quite well, there's a few things you can do, like adding in like a curves layer, and I'm gonna excuse me, bump up my curves. All right, something like that, and then file, save as. I'm gonna select JPEG, not JPEG 2000, but JPEG. Give it a name, and then save it where I want it. And you're all done.